Hey, Birth Warrior. Welcome to another episode of the Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss podcast. This is your host, Natalie Facey, and the topic we'll be diving into today is on how sexual trauma shows up in pregnancy, in childbirth. And I had a different topic in mind. There's another topic that has been germinating inside of me. But I woke up with this on my mind, and I often just try to follow the guidance of spirit without having to question it or without having to make it be logical. And I know that if this is meant for you, then it's here, it's for you, right? So whoever this is meant for, whatever reason, why this is a topic that I should speak to today, then I'm going to trust that that is going to be beneficial to you or to someone else. So thank you for tuning in. So I've done other topics on trauma in general, actually a lot of topics on trauma, going through a loss, that in itself is trauma. Going through infertility, that is trauma. Having a previous really difficult or scary childbirth experience, that in itself is trauma. But I want to speak specifically to sexual trauma because the impact that has is a slightly different one because of how much more shame is associated with it. And the reason why I want to address this topic in general is because it does show up in pregnancy and it does show up in childbirth. And I want you to have the awareness of when it's there so that the trauma response doesn't take you over completely. So I love a definition of trauma that was shared by Gabor Mate. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He has spent years as I think, family physician and has always been interested in trauma because he was born, I think, when the Holocaust was just about to start and has just had a lot of trauma around him, right? Like he was living through that. And so the trauma was a part of his cells and his body while he was a baby. So he has studied trauma very, very deeply. He has helped people to work through trauma. And this definition that he shared was that trauma isn't the experience, right? Trauma isn't the thing that happened to you. Like that was a traumatic experience or it was a traumatic incident. The trauma is how it changes you. The trauma is what you continue to live with even after the incident or the experience is over, right? So someone who's gone through any form of sexual assault, any form of violation on their body, that experience might have happened once, it might have been recurring, but the fact that it's not still happening right now, it doesn't mean that the aftermath of that doesn't live in their body, right? And, going back to his point of like how it changes you, how it changes someone is that they may live with very deep shame, right? They may live with a deep sense of guilt if they feel as though something that they did caused that violation. They may live with a lot of fear and a sense of unsafety being in the world. They may live not being able to trust people, right? Feeling as though they're on their own and they can't rely on anyone's trust. They may feel as though they can't trust their own bodies, they can't rely on their bodies, or they can't rely on their own judgment. So going through any form of sexual assault or sexual abuse, it really is damaging to someone, right? It's damaging to them to their core unless there is healing work that's done that starts to repair the image of who they are. So the examples that I shared just now were more on the disempowering end of the scale, right? So the shame, the guilt, the distrust, that's more disempowering. Now, the other end of the scale, the other extreme, is really being a fighter, right? So this isn't in the middle. In the middle, that's the place of balance. That's the optimal. The other extreme is really being a fighter and really being in opposition of things that they might not think are in their favor, which that's not a bad idea to be in opposition of something, right? But there could be this sense, actually, the mistrust, I would say, also falls on this end of the spectrum. There could be this trust that they have to fight on their own, push on their own. There's no one who's with them by their side. They're just going to have to like make it on their own. So I'm going to share examples of how this shows up in pregnancy and this shows up in childbirth. And if you've had any experience with sexual assault or sexual abuse, start to think of, how do these things show up in my experience? Even if you're not pregnant right now, think of how they show up in your day to day, because it means that during pregnancy, they might also show up. The other thing to note is that, let's say that you were living your life, you went through the trauma, you might have had some support, like some healing work, some repair was done, right? And you've been living a normal, happy life. Now, when you go through pregnancy, because you're going through this big experience that changes both your life and your body, then that might be re-traumatizing. That might bring in memories, or it might bring in emotions, it might bring in uncertainty or fear at some level that you wouldn't be experiencing if you didn't have the trauma before, right? If you didn't go through the traumatic experience before, which has now created the trauma. So just know that, pregnancy or childbirth might be the experience that triggers some deeper level of re-traumatizing, or some level of revisiting the trauma to occur because of the shift it creates in your body and your being, right? And so the reason why this, revisiting of the trauma might occur, or why you might go through this cycle of experiencing the trauma on what feels like a deeper level through pregnancy and through childbirth, is how that experience changes you. So being pregnant, you might feel as though you have lost agency over your body. You might feel as though you've lost control over your body. You've lost some of your independence. Or you might feel this greater sense of pressure and responsibility to now take care of this human who is living inside of your body, right? And if you already have this sense as though, oh, I'm not good at taking care of myself, much less another person, then it puts you in a position where you're not really confident in your ability to do that. And that might have been some messaging that came as a result of the trauma, right? It's like, if that experience happened, and this ties into the guilt, if that experience happened and I wasn't able to take care of myself, what makes me capable of taking care of another human? Right? So I just want to illustrate that as an example of how trauma might show up in a bigger way because of something that wasn't resolved from the past. And even though you've been living your life for years, happy and functional and even thriving, like being pregnant might throw you a loop. Is that the expression? Throw you a loop, throw you for a loop? I'm not good at these American expressions. I'm going to admit I'm not that good at them. Anywho, you understand what I mean, right? It might put you in this position of being unsettled and feeling really ungrounded, because it's something that takes you off balance, and it's something that moves whatever you had put in place to function in your day-to-day after trauma, it moves that. Like, that isn't enough anymore, because the experience that you're going through is a different one. And it just means that you haven't developed those tools, or you haven't learned those tools to move through this next experience, which feels really big and feels really scary. Okay, so I want to highlight a few ways in which trauma responses can show up on the pregnancy journey or during childbirth. You know, obviously there are other ways that it might show up while you're trying to conceive, and I think for that it just emphasizes this sense that if it's not working right, if you're having challenges with fertility, it just emphasizes this sense that you're not doing something well enough, or your body isn't working, and so there is pain that comes up there, right? So just wanted to make that note for someone who's on the fertility journey. For someone who is pregnant, again, I mentioned the sense that you have lost agency over your body, right? So you in your individual body can get up and go to a party and be your own person and eat what you want and do what you want. But when you're pregnant, it's now you and someone else, right? It's you and another small human. And by the way, you're being told all the things that you should stay away from and all the things that you should do for this little human, right? And so if gaining your independence, or really being rooted in your sense of agency and independence, if that was something that was important for your healing after going through any form of sexual trauma, it's like you've lost your independence now, right? And so that tool that you used, that tool that gave you this sense of stability and groundedness, you no longer have that. So it challenges your sense of self, it challenges your sense of safety, right? So that's one point. Another point is feeling as though something has taken over your body, right? So going through sexual assault, someone does take over your body, someone does violate your body. Someone does take away your right to say yes or no, right? And being pregnant, even if it is a planned and wanted pregnancy, there's shit happening on a daily and weekly basis that you're like, I did not sign up for this, right? So whether it's the morning sickness or the constipation or the pain in the hips or the inability to sleep comfortably during the night, all sorts of things are happening that you're like, we didn't agree on this, right? So it's as though something is taken over your body. And having gone through an experience and having the memory in your body that anything that happens that doesn't happen with your consent is something that you don't want, right? So having that experience that, oh, when something happens without my consent, or when something happens without me being able to say yes, then that thing is bad. So you're making those associations while you're pregnant. If something unexpected is happening, like, feet swelling, or I don't know if you've had the experience of your nose swelling, like whatever is happening that you're like, I didn't expect this shit. Why is this happening? Then it feels like pregnancy is an assault on your body versus something that you embrace, right? I hope you're making the connection there. Okay. And of course, there are other reasons why pregnancy might feel like it's an assault on your body, but just having the memory of sexual assault, there is an association that's made in your mind that makes pregnancy something that you might resent. Okay. So the other thing, and this third point comes as a result of the losing the agency over your body and feeling as though something is taken over your body without your consent. So what could happen as a result is your resistance to pregnancy, feeling tightness in your body and having tension in your body because of the resistance to the pregnancy. And as I'm saying that, I really want to make the point that you're not trying to not have your baby, right? You're not trying to create an environment that is uncomfortable for your baby. But even while you're in that pregnancy, there's tightness and tension that you're holding in your body because of the fears that might be there. And those fears and those things that you resist or resent might be on a conscious or a subconscious level, right? But it does mean that when you're holding a lot of that tension in your body, it's creating stress. So that is sort of like the pregnancy category. I'm going to go to another category, which still happens in pregnancy, and this is relating to appointments. I think that we can almost agree universally that vaginal examinations are very uncomfortable. I don't know if anyone is into them, but I personally am not. Right? They're just not comfortable. And of course, it's a part of the body that is so sacred. And if you're being examined by someone who is in a rush, by someone who isn't polite, by someone who doesn't greet you properly, by someone who doesn't take their damn time. Right now, as I'm speaking, I'm remembering examinations where like things were just shoved into me and I wanted to kick someone in the face. Right? Those things can be really uncomfortable. Right? So imagine someone going through any form of sexual assault where they've been violated and having to go through that experience where they're not even being treated with respect and care, they're not greeted properly, right? So on their end, it's almost like they are open. The word that's coming to mind is vulnerability, but they're giving access to a part of their body that is so sacred, but has also been harmed. And if that access isn't treated with the utmost care and respect and reverence, then that shit could be re traumatizing, right? It could be re traumatizing so that, your body tightens up and so that you might feel disrespected or even defiled in the examination room. So, doctors and nurses and technicians who are coming into contact with people's bodies, they really need to approach it from this place of reverence, right? Because the body is holy. It is. It's this beautiful sacred temple. And who knows what may have happened to someone's body? Who knows what someone might have in their history of walking this planet that has so much hurt and so much harm, right? Who knows what someone might have experienced? And for you to have experienced something really difficult, really horrific, and to be picking up the pieces from that and to lie down in an examination room, half dressed, with your legs open, and have someone not show you respect, not show you that reverence, not show you that care. Like just talking about that feels heartbreaking, right? And that is how someone can experience trauma over again, can walk out of a room feeling shame, can walk out of a room feeling unseen and feeling invisible because the person that was interacting with them didn't show them the care that they needed, right? So, such a big point for appointments, right? And if your partner, whether it's someone that you're with, meaning in an intimate relationship, or a family member who's supporting you, like your birthing partner, if you don't have someone in the room who can help to hold loving space for you, then it's scary. It's scary. Because not only have you already gone through trauma that you might still be unpacking and healing, but some idiot who interacts with you does something that adds more harm on top of what you're still working through, what you're still working to heal, right? So appointments are a big one. Again, you might hold the tension in your body, so the tightness in your body, which might, the person might complain that you're not doing something enough because of the tension that you're feeling in your body, and their comment might make you feel, again, not enough, right? Because you're not doing something right, you're not doing it the right way they want to, or to whatever degree they want, right? So shame is likely to show up there. Feeling disempowered is likely to show up there. So if just being in the examination room, if just being half naked, if having to have your legs open or having to have something cold and unwelcoming on your body, if all of these things are too overwhelming for you, then it might lead to you feeling frozen. And when you're in this state of being frozen, you've again lost agency over your body, because you can no longer consciously have control over your body, right? You no longer have conscious control because you're in a state of being frozen, right? It means that when you could be asking questions, when you could be trying to get clarification, when you could be trying to advocate for yourself, those things don't come to mind at all, because you're just trying to get that thing done as quickly as possible and get the heck out, right? So all of those things are possible. And I know that as I'm speaking, some of these things might resonate with you on some level. Okay. So the other thing that I want to note is that usually during pregnancy, the partner, they often take the lead of the birthing person, right? Because the pregnant person is growing the baby in their body. They often take their lead because they just see you as the expert, or at least the person who knows more about what's going on. So usually the partner isn't the one who has the strongest voice in the room. The partner isn't the one who is going to be asking all the questions. This isn't always the case, but this is usually the case, right? As the pregnant person, they're going to take your lead because they assume that you know more about what's going on than they do, right? And sometimes they don't want to look silly. They don't want to ask questions that you might already know the answer for. And so they might just sit there being quiet. And at home, they might ask questions, or they might just wait for you to tell them what to do in order for them to get into action, right? So it means that it's really important to help to empower your partner so that your partner can advocate for you, right? It's important that you let your partner know what happens in your body when you enter a hospital, what happens in your body when you enter an examination room, or when you're asked to take your clothes off. Like, what happens? Do you start sweating? Do memories come to you? Do you feel like your body is frozen? So it means that your partner can look out for those cues and just rub a hand on your shoulder or on your back, bringing you back into your body, reminding you that you're safe, reminding you that you're in the present, and reminding you that you're supported. It is such a simple but also loving thing to do, right? Because usually when we are revisited by a traumatic experience, or when we're having a trauma response, we exit our bodies, right? We're no longer in the room. We're back in that place where the trauma happened, right? But just having this gentle nudge on your shoulders, or this like squeeze, reminding you, hey, we're here and you're safe, right? So do let your partner know what's going on so that they can be there for you. Okay. All right. So let's talk about childbirth. And whoa, this is a big one. This is a big one. So in episode, I think it was 24. Let me check. Yes, episode 24 on the risk factors linked to complications in pregnancy and childbirth. So in that episode, I read from a book called Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom by Dr. Christian Northrup. And I shared evidence from studies that were done, but also, observations that she has made in her probably 30 plus year career as a women's health doctor and I think an OBGYN. And essentially, what is shown is that there are markers that can be used to identify when someone will likely have complications in childbirth, right? When something will go wrong in the midst of giving birth. A lot of those markers are linked to people who've had trauma, right? So probably won't remember them right off the top of my head. And I highly recommend that you listen to that episode. Again, it's episode 24. No, 28. 28. Some of the things that they mentioned were not being able to surrender to the process, which childbirth comes with uncertainty, right? Childbirth comes with levels of discomfort that you didn't know existed. It could, right? That is one thing that can happen in childbirth. It comes with your body doing things that you don't give it permission to do, right? Things happening that you're not having control over. Childbirth is also a beautiful process, and it works better when you're able to surrender to what your body's doing, right? Because the body knows where the baby is in labor, the body knows what needs to happen. But if there is tightness and tension and holding on and not being able to surrender, not being able to trust and rest in the knowing that things are unfolding the way they're meant to unfold, it means that there's a higher likelihood for there to be complications, right? So it's sort of like the birthing person getting into the way of the body's natural progress, right? Other things were, let's see. So one of them was not being able to trust. Another one, I think it was like the way someone perceived their body, right? So it's having this image of themselves and their body that they're weak. One of the points were like having a childlike disposition. So really not being able to root in your sovereignty, root into your being the adult, right? Root into your being the woman or the birthing person or the adult, right? And feeling childlike because it feels as though this experience is one of terror, right? So I know that I'm sharing a lot of things. I know that there might be discomfort that's coming up for you. Stay to the end because I'm going to share some resources that are going to be really helpful, okay? So again, highly recommend that you listen to episode 28. And in episode 30, which is the most recent episode that was done, I spoke with Marisa Sullivan, who is a pleasure activist and an all-around incredible person and magical, wise woman. And she was sharing that a lot of the clients that come to her, it's often that there is an inability for them to experience pleasure during intercourse or pleasure in their relationship or while being intimate with their partner, or there's some blockage that's there sexually. And often the case is that they had experienced some form of sexual trauma before that creates some blockage in their body, right? So it's almost like some energy, some force, some belief, some emotion, something is in the way as they're trying to experience pleasure in their bodies. And that does impact fertility. It does impact the ability to conceive. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is all of this has to do with the body, for the body having the ability to be free, for the body having the ability to really let go and really surrender, right? And so when trauma is still present in the body, then it serves as a blockage to all of these experiences that require the body to be able to be present and require the body to be able to surrender. Okay. So going back to the category of childbirth. So what usually happens is that you are now in a room or a situation that feels out of your control, right? So not only is there, and this most likely happens if you're giving birth in the hospital system. So not only is there a lot of busyness and activity around you, and definitely strangers like nurses you've never seen before, doctors that you may never have seen before, the person who is helping you to give birth to your baby, the doctor, you might have never met this person before, right? And in addition to not ever meeting the people in the room, they're wearing masks. And when you're not able to see someone's entire face and their entire expression, and when you've gone through experiences where you've been hurt by other people, there's a great sense of unsafety in your body because you can't read their faces. You don't know what their intention is. And that creates a lot of unsettling in your body, right? So that's a really important one. And I don't know that people have thought of that on a conscious level, but you may have definitely felt it subconsciously, right? Like if I can't see your face, I can't trust you. I need to be seeing your eyes, like I need to be reading everything, right? So imagine being in a situation where you feel as though you are at your most vulnerable. And by the way, you don't know the people in the room. They might be telling you to do things, or sometimes at a higher tone, which might feel like they're yelling at you or might feel like they're commanding you. Why am I trying to soften this? Yes, doctors and nurses might yell at you, not in a way that they're being aggressive, but in the midst of the intensity of childbirth and wanting to encourage you to push or whatever, it might feel like someone is yelling at you. So that happens. And in your body, you might feel scared. You might feel really unsettled. You might feel unsafe, right? So all of that happens. And I think the sad thing is that it can complicate childbirth. It can lead to challenges in childbirth without the acknowledgement that more could have been done to create a safer environment for the birthing person, right? For example, everyone, I don't know how realistic this is, but it would be good to see everyone's face before. So if they want to like stay, you know, 6 feet away from you and just show you their face while they introduce themselves with a smile, then you know who's under the mask. That's one. Or if there is a higher likelihood that either this doctor or this doctor might be the doctor attending your birth, then seeing a picture of that person, being able to read the bio of that person, being familiar with who that person is, right? And I know in some cases, your pregnancy might be at like a group practice, and so there are different people, but you might be going to this one doctor week after week, but someone else might show up at the birth, right? So it's getting you rooted into the idea of, all right, it's either going to be this person or this person. So that sense of unsafety that you might feel, not knowing who is coming and not being familiar with the person that's coming, like that is put at ease, right? Because you can already pull up someone's bio on the website or whatever, so that there's just this softening in your body of having some question answered, of having something being certain. Okay. So I'm going to go into, let me see if there's anything else on childbirth. Yeah, overall, because of the sense of unsafety in your body, you're not able to surrender to the process. However, the external environment also feels unsafe, right? So there is, I don't want to use the word terror, but in this book that I was reading, it was saying that, and this is Christian Northrup's book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, so some birthing people might perceive pregnancy as something that brings terror to their body. And who is to blame? Like, we are not to be blamed, let me tell you. Birthing people are not to be blamed for being afraid of pregnancy, because every single movie that we've seen about pregnancy, it usually looks like this person is having a horrible time, right? And of course, if you've already had a childbirth experience that was traumatic, right? Of course, if it was related to loss and it wasn't this beautiful, magical birth, heck yeah, you're going to go into your next pregnancy like, I don't really want to do this, or I don't know if I can handle this, right? So I also want to add that background that we didn't wake up and decide that we don't like childbirth and that childbirth is terrible. We have been fed a lot of programming where childbirth looks absolutely terrible and horrific, right? And if you've gone through the lived traumatic childbirth experience, then that is what is living in your body. That is what you're holding in your memory and your body. So if you're not exposed to something different, then that is your expectation going in. Okay. So let us talk about solutions, right? Solutions. Because I want you to be empowered, right? We're not going to sit here talking about all the problems without actually having a way to work through them. Okay. So the first one is for you to be aware of what is happening in your body. What's happening in your body. It requires that you just pause, right? So if you're feeling really activated, if you're feeling nervousness or anxiety or overwhelmed, if you're feeling any kind of emotion that you might not even be able to name the emotion, but you know that it doesn't feel good. That's probably a better way to identify it. Anything that you're feeling that doesn't feel good, just pause in the moment, begin to deepen your breath. It helps when you place your hand on your body, so it can be on your heart, it can be on your thighs, or you can place your hands on, any surface that's close by, so a desk, a bed, a chair, anything that you can touch that brings you to the present moment. So just place your hand on yourself or on something and breathe, right? And when you start to feel a sense of calm, when you start to feel your heart start to beat at a more normal pace, when you feel your body going back to a state of balance, start to identify what was the thing that triggered you. What was the thing that triggered that emotional response in you? Was it a memory? Was it a thought? Did you see the image of something? Was it, it could have been that you saw a nurse who was a part of your previous childbirth experience that was difficult. It could be that someone spoke to you in a way where you felt disrespected, disempowered, and it reminded you of trauma that you experienced earlier in your life, right? So just identify what that thing is and then notice how your body responded. So was it the sweating? Was it breathlessness? Was it your heart racing? And what I want you to become aware of is when you're having that trauma response, it's not possible for you to think logically at the same time because your brain moves out of the logical, conscious brain and the reptilian brain takes over. The part of your brain that just protects you when you're unsafe, that gets you into action right away. That's the part of the brain that takes over. And so know that this practice of allowing your breath to come back to its normal pace, this practice of just allowing your heartbeat to come back to its normal pace, this practice of being conscious of what's happening, this is bringing you back into your agency. This is bringing you back into having control over your body and control over your thinking, control over the next choice that you make. Okay? And so know that you can always do this whenever something feels really overwhelming, whenever you're not able to think or think clearly, whenever you feel as though you've lost control, you can always just pause. If you need to ask for more time before making a decision, you can do that. If you need to ask people to get the hell out of the room, you can also do that. Let me rephrase that because that sounded mean. If you need to ask people to give you a moment, you can do that, right? So whether it's you alone in the room or you and your partner, you and your birthing partner, your birthing companion, you can do that. And so I like sharing this as the first example because it's a reminder that you get to reclaim your own agency, right? No one has the ability to control you. You get to take your power and hold your power, stand in your power in the moment, just by knowing that you can ask for a pause, you can ask for more time and get yourself back into balance. Okay? So that's the first one. And the second one is to educate yourself on the childbirth process, right? I don't think this is something that enough people do because I don't know why, actually. I don't know why, right? I understand the point that our bodies are made to naturally give birth. Like, I get that. I get that the body was made in a certain way to make childbirth easy. Like, I am on board with that. But if you've never done it before, or if the first time that it happened, it was really traumatic, then it means that you would really benefit from being educated on how the process works, right? So this silly little example has been in my mind, like, all right, as humans, we have two legs. And we know that we will learn to walk. Like, our body was made so that walking is natural for us. But if we're not taught how to walk, it's not going to happen or it won't happen well, right? So if we live in a family that walks on all fours, you best believe that we're going to be walking on all fours because that's what we see around us. So if the people around us or what we've been exposed to relating to childbirth is that it's scary, it's traumatic, it's painful, it's the most horrifying thing ever and see how long you can deal with the pain, or decide to get pain meds as soon as possible. Like, if that's what we're being taught, then that's the expectation going in. So, all of that to say that I highly, highly recommend that if you are pregnant, you sign up for a childbirth education class. A childbirth education class will take you through the stages of labor. A childbirth education class will also teach you what to do after your baby is born, right? So you'll get an introduction to breastfeeding, newborn care, changing diapers, all of that stuff. And here's the best part: your partner gets to join you. Your partner also gets to be educated with you. So they're not the clueless one in the room, right? They're not the one in the room looking at you like, oh, I don't know. What do we do next? Right? They're on top of it so that you can rest in whatever is happening in your body. I've actually been thinking of creating a course on how to surrender to the birthing process. That might not be the name of it, but like that is what I'm going to be teaching about. But like how to have trust. Maybe this is a better title, like how to have trust in your body in the birthing process. No, the reason why I'm bringing that up is if you don't trust the people in the room, and if you don't trust not necessarily the people in the room, like they're going to do you harm, even though that is also happening, right? But that's a whole other topic. But if you don't trust the ability of the people in the room to be supportive and actually to just be useful in the room, right? If you're not trusting the people in the room to be helpful and useful, your body isn't going to surrender. Your body isn't going to let go. Your body is going to be holding on for dear life because you're like, who's got my back? Who knows what's happening? Who knows what should be happening, right? So have your partner join the childbirth education class so that they know what's happening at the different stages, right? They can anticipate your needs. I'm thinking of a couple that I worked with some time ago, and trust me, when that happens, it's so freaking beautiful. Like when the partner knows what's happening, it is so freaking beautiful, right? Because the birthing person can more easily surrender, knowing that they don't have to be the one keeping tabs on everything. They don't have to be the one telling the partner to, get the water or get the ice or put on the fan or do whatever, because the partner already can anticipate what's happening, right? So it's so, so important that your partner is as educated as you are. And if that's not possible, that they attended a childbirth education class with you. Okay. All right. So, childbirth education class, please do it. Sometimes, depending on who you're giving birth with, they might be offering it. So, if you're giving birth at a hospital, they might have courses, and they usually last a couple of weeks just for like an hour or an hour and a half a day. It might be like a 4-week course. So, it might be, I don't know, maybe 6 hours in all or 8 hours in all. And trust me, it is well worth it because obviously you're here, so you were born. It doesn't mean that you're an expert in giving birth. So learning what's happening in your body, I actually didn't make this point, but it's so important. Learning what is happening in your body at the different stages, that will help you to surrender and that will help you to move with the process, right? So if you're moving into a stage, let's say very early in labor when the contractions are really spaced out, you don't necessarily have to wonder if it's normal because you already know that it's normal, right? So you might text your doula and say, oh, I think early labor is on because this is what's happening and this is how many minutes apart the contractions are, right? And I'll talk about the doula afterwards. So, stick around for the rest of it, right? So as things are happening in your body, you don't feel clueless. And because you don't feel clueless, you don't feel afraid. There's less fear that you have, right? And your partner is right there with you, right? Because you've received the education together and you're not wondering, is this normal? Should this be happening? You just know that, okay, my body's doing it. It's happening. We're doing it. Okay. So definitely sign up for a childbirth education class. I was mentioning earlier that usually the hospital or birthing center where you're giving birth offers it. If it's not offered through the hospital, or if you've read the description and it doesn't look as informative as you'd like it to be, if it's like a 1 day thing, that's probably not enough. If it's like a 1 day webinar that your hospital offers online, it's not going to be enough, right? If you're working with a midwife, that might be different, right? Because working with a midwifery practice, there is often so much education that is happening. And I don't want to give anything away because I'm thinking of one of my upcoming guests who's going to be talking about her experience working with a midwife. But there's often more education that happens when you're working with a midwife. And so having a 1 day session on what to expect in childbirth and the different stages of childbirth, that might be totally enough because you've already been learning so much, working directly with a midwife, right? So all of that to say, they are offered either by the hospital or the birthing center or by the midwife that you're working with. And sometimes they're offered online by different childbirth educators who just do that as a part of their job by helping you to be prepared for the birthing process. And it's actually a cool experience because you get to meet other parents who are planning to give birth. You get to ask your questions and you get to feel just a whole lot more comfortable about the entire birthing experience. Okay. I've spent so much time on that one point because it's such an important one. Okay, I'm moving on to the next one now. Okay, so the next one, which I alluded to earlier, is to hire a doula. So who is a doula? You can think of a doula as a birth companion. So it's someone who is in the room with you when you're giving birth. They're also virtual doulas, and so someone might be virtually in the room with you. But essentially, your doula offers emotional support. Your doula offers physical support if they're in the room with you. If they are virtual, then they use your partner as their hands and their feet. So your doula works with your partner to give you the comfort and whatever adjustments that might be helpful as you're giving birth, right? So your doula is not your midwife. Your doula is not medically trained. They're not doing anything medical. They are a form of emotional support and physical support, especially when you're going through labor, right? So your doula is there with you throughout your entire labor process. Before you go into labor, your doula usually offers 1 to 2 prenatal visits, depending on whatever package you've paid for with them. And in those prenatal visits, your doula is helping you to understand what your different options are during childbirth so that you can make educated decisions, right? Your doula isn't supposed to be telling you what to do. Your doula is educating you on what your options are, the risks and benefits of those options so that you can make an educated decision. All right. And your doula is working with you and your partner. So while you're having your prenatal visits, your doula would likely encourage that your partner is there as well, because they want your partner to be as involved in the process as possible, right? So that what you know, your partner also knows. So prenatal visit number one is usually helping you to create what's called a birthing plan. And your birthing plan, think of it as a document that shows your wishes and your desires for your birth. So if you want a natural birth, that would be in your birthing plan. If you want no epidural, that would be in your birthing plan. If you want epidural as an option and you will ask for it when you're ready, that would be in your birthing plan, right? So it's putting all of these agreements together so that you can share that with your birthing team prior to your going into labor. Share that with your doctor, your nurse, whoever is the person that you're seeing for your prenatal visits, or your midwife, so that they know what your desire is for your birth. And everyone is in agreement on what your desires are and are supporting you towards that goal. Doesn't always happen, but again, that's for another point. So prenatal visit number two, that is usually when your doula might take you through different positions for birth. So they might also show you positions for reducing discomfort. So if you're feeling discomfort around your lower back or in your pelvis or whatever, they might show you positions and stretches that can help you to relieve those. So what's the best way to describe your doula? Yeah, it's like thinking of your doula as your partner as you're going through the childbirth process, right? Your partner and your guide as you're going through the childbirth process. And can I just say that when you are working with a doctor in the medical system, your doctor usually comes in when it's time to catch the baby. Your doctor usually comes in when it's time for you to push. So your doctor isn't like there with you all the time, and the nurses are not there with you all the time. The nurses are definitely there with you more than your doctor is there with you. But I know that for me, I definitely just assumed that they are always there with you, right? Because in the little clips that you see on TV, which is really when the person is in the midst of pushing, everyone's in the room who needs to be in the room, right? So you don't think of what happens when you might be going through the contractions or the waves, as doulas like to call them, myself among those doulas. So as you're going through those waves, you don't really see what any of that on TV, right? But just know that your doctor is not in the room with you all the time. Your nurse is coming in and out of the room to check your vitals. If the baby's being monitored, to check the monitoring of the baby and make sure that everything is okay. Your doula is there with you all the time. Your doula is there with you all the time. Your doula is always there with you. And that is such a big factor that contributes to your sense of safety. It is such a huge element that contributes to your sense of safety, right? So I know that one of the main reasons why a lot of people get doulas, particularly women of color or people of color, is that they want someone in the room who's able to advocate for them, right? Because let's just acknowledge that some really shitty and scary things have been happening inside of hospitals, particularly to women of color. Ooh, this is making me emotional. Ugh, I have to fan myself now. Yeah, let's just acknowledge that it's been really scary for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous women and people of color to give birth in hospitals. I was the backup doula for a woman and her partner who were having this. I was basically invited to an intro call, like a call to be introduced to them so that they would know who I am and get to know me in case I needed to support their labor. And I asked this woman, a Black woman, and her partner was on the call as well, and her primary doula, who were all on the call. I asked her what fears did she have that she hadn't expressed to anyone yet? Like, what were the fears behind the fears? And the fears for me are always really important. You know, like we've been talking about in this episode, is that the fears show up, right? The what's held in the body as trauma, that shows up. And so I want to be able to know what you're holding so that I can help to support you before we get into the delivery room, right? Before we get into the birthing room, because at that point, you have already lost conscious awareness of what's happening, right? You already feel as though something has taken over your body and something has removed your sense of agency. And so, if we can work through things before, which is also what I do in my coaching, if we can work through those things before, then it means that they are no longer a threat as you're giving birth. So when I asked this woman what her fear was that she hadn't expressed before, like I framed it as, what's the fear behind the fear, right? The thing all the way in the back of your mind that you haven't asked anyone, you haven't shared with anyone before. And what she said was that if something goes wrong and there is a choice between her and her baby, then she wants the doctors to choose her baby. And that was just fucking heartbreaking. That was so heartbreaking that this woman, looking to go into a hospital and give birth, felt as though this was a form of sacrifice. Felt as though yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then she said, and my husband says no, right? Or partner. And my partner says no. Like, he wants to make sure that I'm okay. Well, of course. Of course he wants to make sure that you're okay. Both of you should be okay. Both you and your baby. Right? You shouldn't be worried that there is a high likelihood that just one of you might make it out of the experience of childbirth alive. Right? Like, that is just so heartbreaking. Yeah. So the reason why I brought up that story and the reason why that came back to me as a memory is because a lot of people hire doulas because they feel as though doulas are able to protect them in the midst of childbirth, that it's less likely that they'll die. To put it plain and simple, it's less likely that they'll die if there's someone else in the room watching out for them. And doulas are absolutely a form of advocacy, right? And different doulas are trained in different ways. Some doulas, actually, I think that, well, I guess different doulas operate in different ways, but usually your doula isn't speaking on your behalf. Usually your doula is informing you of what your rights are. However, if your doula senses that you haven't given enough time and grace to make a decision and that you are feeling pressured or forced, coerced into something, then your doula might ask everyone to pause, ask for a timeout so that you can have time to make a decision, right? So sometimes your doula is informing you, and other times your doula might step in and take control of what's happening in the room if shit starts getting crazy, right? It doesn't mean that it's your doula's responsibility or that your doula even has the power to fight an entire system or to take on an entire system, right? Because there is so much that happens in the normal hospital processes that inhibits a birthing person's body to birth naturally and then leads to complications, which then leads to a C-section. All C-sections aren't wrong, right? Because sometimes C-sections are the life-saving operation for you and your baby, right? So when you're in that situation, a C-section is the thing that needed to happen. But there are also times when your birth leads to a C-section. And when I say you, I just mean like in general, right? You or someone's, right? There are times when a birth leads to a C-section, and it's because something was introduced too early that could have sped up the birthing process, right? That could have started labor before it needed to be started, or that inhibited the birthing person's ability to feel, to physically feel and know what's happening in their body and to trust their body, or with some part of the process being forced and the rest of the body not being ready, right? So in labor, one example is that the cervix ripens and you become dilated as the labor, more and more dilated as the labor is progressing. Now, if your labor starts early, before the ripening of the cervix and before the opening of the cervix, then you have doctors and nurses coming into the room and complaining about you not dilating fast enough. Well, shit, if you didn't start the labor before it should have, maybe this person would have been dilating at the pace of their body, right? Or at the pace of the baby, right? Because in all cases, it's the baby that should start the labor unless there are some other circumstances that require something else to be the case, right? So I'm not speaking for all pregnancies and all childbirth experiences, because of course there are going to be exceptions based on whatever the different situation is, right? So yeah, the normal. And, you know, one of the movies that I've recommended before is The Business of Being Born. And it's funny because that documentary was filmed years ago. It's like, you can tell that it's an older documentary because of, like, you know, when you're watching something that's much older, like just like the videography and what people are wearing and how people's hair is styled, like all of those things indicate that this is an older documentary. And I cannot think of one thing in that documentary that isn't still true, that doesn't still happen, which is crazy. And so I don't want to bash the hospital system. I don't want to bash the medical system, because I think that there are good people who go into the medical system wanting to be doctors, gynecologists, OBs, you know, nurses, whatever the case might be, often because they want to make a difference in people's lives. But if you're in a system with a certain structure and rules, and if you're being taught by that same system, then of course you're going to follow what that system says. And usually in that system, I would say that the overall approach is that the woman or the birthing person isn't really trusted. As the birthing person, you're not encouraged to trust your body and listen to your body, and you're not given the full time that you need. Like, best believe that when you go into a hospital, you're on a timeline. You are on a timeline. So if if you're in early contractions and you get, you know, scared because you feel like something has gone wrong and you go into the hospital, then there's a very high likelihood that you will be given some drug to speed up your labor, or to start your labor, to bring on your labor, right? And when you're given that drug, Pitocin, labor comes on very intensely. So labor builds on itself. And, you know, when you take your childbirth education class, this is something that you learn if you don't already know it. I won't assume that you won't already know it, but this is something that's taught in the childbirth education class. So labor builds on itself. Like it starts off being slower and more paced. It's like uncomfortable but isn't painful. And then, the waves or the contractions come closer together, so you're feeling them more often. And as labor is progressing, they are growing to be more intense. And you might then use the word pain to describe them, but I would say more intense. But your body has been built up to that, right? Because you've already been experiencing sensation coming closer more quickly and more intense. So, like, you are prepared for that. You're riding the wave into that, right? So it's sort of like walking on a mountain and you keep going, right? It's more intense, but all right, I've got this because I just walked X number of miles. And now, as I am approaching the peak when it gets the most intense, then you're ready, you're feeling ready. Even the energy in your body is building you up to that. Now, when you're given a drug like Pitocin, it's like someone just like drops you off on a helicopter on top of the freaking mountain. And so you're feeling the intensity of that without your body being prepared, right? And what usually happens after that is that you're given, pain meds to reduce the pain, because of course you're in pain. Your body didn't prepare for that. Your body didn't gradually build up to that. So even I would say that the hormones at work in your body, like in concert to just make everything this smooth and natural process, that doesn't happen naturally because you're placed at the top of this mountain with these intense emotions. And so let's say that in the natural process, it would have been, a high energy moving up to that, and you're playing your music and you're moving with your partner. Your doula is cheering you on and rubbing your back and fanning you, and there's some essential oils going in the background, and it's this whole vibe. And as the sensations are becoming more intense, you might start with some active music, right? Some pump up the volume music, right? You're feeling the vibe and you're feeling your baby and you're moving with it, right? So imagine this other scenario. You're at home, you're feeling discomfort, contractions start, you go into the hospital because you're like, oh my gosh, baby's here. And actually, most people go to the hospital earlier than they should. So know that that's very likely. So you're like, all right, baby's here. We're going to the hospital. They have you in the room. They're like, okay, you've been here for a while. Your labor hasn't started. And they ask you in the nicest tone ever, do you want us to help you with starting your labor to get things started? That's how they ask you, like this nice, sweet voice. And you're like, yeah, of course. I'm so ready to meet this baby, right? So you tell them yes. They don't tell you about the risks or benefits of this drug that you're being given, right? So if your doula is not in the room, if you haven't done the childbirth education class, you don't know what you don't know. You don't even know what to ask, right? So you're lying in bed, and all of a sudden, it's like the party starts that you're not ready for. So it's the intensity of the discomfort, and it feels, so this is when the terror comes into your body. It feels as though something has taken over your body that you haven't given permission to, and that scares you out of your mind. So not being able to be present in your body and not having given permission to that intense experience, that is what takes you out of your power. So that you're like, please give me something for this pain. I want to rip my hair out. So you're given a drug for the pain. They might start you with something lighter, meaning it might not be the epidural, or heck, they might bring you directly to the epidural. So you're given the epidural, and once you're given the epidural, you're numb from your lower back all the way down. So Is it the lower back or is it further up? It might be further up actually, because you're no longer able to sense what's happening in your body, right? So, yeah, you're no longer able to sense the movement of the baby in your body, which means as though the imagery that's coming to mind is like being in a room blindfolded. You're in the room and you just don't know what's there and you don't know what's happening because you've lost your ability to feel in your body. I want to remove all of the blame and all of the guilt out of this, right? Because if you were better educated on the risks and the benefits, and if you had other options, right? Because when pain is unbearable, your nurses are actually going to want to help to relieve the pain. Your partner is going to be like, please, can we do something about the pain, right? And unless you know the risks of getting the epidural or actually other pain medication, then you're not really thinking of it as a big deal, right? So know that this just became a whole other thing. This, I feel like this became more than what I had intended for it to be, but let's just go with it, right? So know that the drugs that you're putting in your body, those drugs are also impacting your baby, right? So just as it makes you drowsy, just as it sort of like knocks out your body for a little bit, it also knocks out your baby, right? And they might not mention that, or that they might mention that in a way that it doesn't sound as severe. But imagine now your baby sort of being, and not unconscious, right? I use the term knocked out just now. So not, they usually tell you to rest after the epidural, and there's a reason for that. It's because of the impact that it has on your baby, or at least that's one of the reasons. So imagine now that a couple of hours after, they might come in and say, let's see if you're ready to push, or let's see how dilated you are, and we'll see if you're ready to push, right? So when it's time to push and your baby has been drugged, that impacts your baby's ability to move through your body, to be moving the way that it would if it had, let's say, its full capacity, right? So I don't really know how we got that far. The point that I was trying to make, and I'll end all of this talk about the hospital system for now. The point that I think, at least, I was trying to make is that the hospital has this very tight system where the outcome is often a C-section if it starts with an intervention, right? And so your doula might be in the room and might be reminding you of what your options are. So there might be other options for pain medication, such as the laughing gas, or some medication that isn't epidural and doesn't remove your ability to feel in your body, which you're going to need when you're giving birth, right? So your doula might remind you of your different options. Your doula might move you into different positions that help to relieve discomfort that you're experiencing. So it's very helpful to have another person in the room who's not your partner, right? Because your partner, even though you've taken the childbirth education class together, your partner isn't trained in all of the comfort measures. And your partner might be impacted by the emotion of it all, right? So your partner sees you in pain and they start feeling very emotional. And with that, not having the ability to think as clearly, not having the ability to maintain this confidence and trust that everything is going well. I'm not saying that this always happens, but when someone else is in the room who knows what is happening in your body from stage to stage, then it gives both you and your partner greater confidence. Okay. Again, I am just going to trust that what I'm sharing today, it's meant for someone to hear it. I'm not going to question why we went into this direction. I'm going to trust that the fact that I'm saying it, someone has been wanting to hear this. Okay. So, yes, your doula being in the room can help. But what I want to say is, you, the birthing person, are always the most powerful person in the room. Meaning, your doula can't do anything that you actually don't want to happen. All right, so I think that was the last one. Hire a doula. So the first one is tune into your body, see what's happening, respond to your needs, know that nothing has to happen without you being fully rooted in your body, right? Without you feeling conscious and aware of the decisions that are being made. Ask for more time, tune into your body, get yourself into a balanced state, and ask for more time if you need it. That's the first one. The second one is educate yourself. So attend a childbirth education class, have your partner or your birthing companion join. And birthing companion means that it doesn't have to be your partner. It might be your mom or your sister or someone else, but that person needs to be attending all of the classes so that they know what's happening. And while you are allowing your body to fully be present in the process, to fully surrender to the process, you don't have to think about the little things like getting the water and the pillow and just like all the little things that you need, right? This person can truly be your support because of the education that they have also received. And then finally is hire a doula and look into other birthing options. So another birthing option could be working with a midwife, for example. The other thing that I just thought of is actually making other people aware of past trauma that you've had and how that might affect how you show up in the birthing room or what your needs are in the birthing room. So it might be helpful to tell your doula that you have had some experience with trauma. You don't even have to say what the trauma is. Tell them, listen, I've been through some stuff. And because of that, when I'm in these examination rooms and when I'm in these hospital rooms, I start to lose my shit, right? I start to feel nervous. I feel like I don't have control over my body anymore. Tell them what's happening so that they can support you, right? So if you need fewer people in the room, I feel like I'm about to vent. I won't vent, but let me just say that the hospitals that are teaching hospitals and have a bunch of residents in the room who are taking notes, you don't need to be the person that they're taking notes on. They can find someone else who doesn't have the history of trauma that you have, right? You don't need to be the person who's being observed, right? And feeling extra vulnerable with a bunch of strangers in the room who are not helping you, who are helping themselves. And so you can ask for no residents in the room if that will help you to feel safer. Okay? And then I was about to share another point, but I won't give it away because one of my upcoming podcast guests might share it. So I'll leave that for now. But the biggest start, like the first place to start, is having awareness. And can I tell you that I thought this episode was going to be like 30 minutes? And obviously it's not. But again, I'm just going to trust that what I'm sharing today, someone needed to hear it. Maybe you needed to hear the first part of it and you're good. Maybe it's this piece that dives more into the childbirth and the hospital system. Whatever is happening here, I'm just going to trust that someone needed to hear this. Okay. So overall, the biggest piece is having awareness of what's happening in your body, having awareness of how your body is now responding to, that experience of sexual trauma, and understanding what your needs are, right? So if you're going through therapy, that might be helpful to bring up in your therapy. Definitely helpful to share with your partner. And it's something that you can journal on, right? I think when we journal on what we're holding in our bodies, then it feels less heavy, it feels less threatening, because we are able to hold this experience somewhere else, right? So a part of holding trauma in the body is that it hasn't been resolved yet. And the body, in its desire to protect you, right, it's going to hold this memory because you haven't found a solution yet. So releasing this memory and releasing this experience would be dangerous to your well-being, because if you haven't resolved it yet, it means that you're not able to protect yourself from it in the future, right? I've sensed that this is why the body holds on to trauma, because once you've resolved something, it means that you've come to this understanding within your body that if this happens again, this is what I can do. If I am faced with this challenge or a threat again, this is how I can respond. When you haven't gotten to that point, then the body holds on to trauma, right? So when you're able to hold that story, hold those memories, hold those experiences somewhere in a journal somewhere, then it's less heavy in your body. All of the holding doesn't have to be in your body because it's being held somewhere. So even if you haven't come to a resolution, you at least know that you can go back to that story and find a resolution, right? So that's one point. So the work that I offer, it's essentially trauma healing work. I don't always call it that because not everyone resonates with the term trauma, but it's healing trauma or unresolved emotions, right? So I consider myself to be an emotional healing guide, which means that I support you in releasing the emotions and the painful memories associated to experiences that are just really difficult. I'm especially passionate about doing this with people who have experienced trauma around pregnancy, childbirth, fertility, because that has been my experience, right? That has been my experience, and it's now a part of the work, my calling, my offering to people who've gone through similar situations. So there are different services or programs that I offer. You're able to book a one session if you'd like. You're able to work with me over the course of a few months on a one-to-one basis. So, as long as you need support. There's also a group program that I'm launching and that I'm so excited about. So you'll hear more about that very, very soon. And that program is going to be over the course of 4 months with a limited number of slots, about 8 people, because I want it to be really small and really intimate. And again, I'll share more about that. I offer support for preparing specifically for childbirth, right? So if you know that you've gone through some form of trauma that makes childbirth really scary, then I offer support specifically for working through that piece. So it doesn't need to be as long as, the other programs that I offer. It's really the month or the weeks leading up to childbirth and feeling as though you're really ready. And if it so happens that you've just given birth, right, or you've already given birth, and that experience was traumatic, then I also offer services to unpack and release and to feel like you've come to a place of resolving what you've been holding, right? The mind and the body come into this place of, oh, I understand what happened, and I can release that now because I saw what happened, and it no longer feels as though I am at risk of that happening, because I have the tools that I need to support myself as I'm moving on my journey into parenthood or whatever, right? So any challenge that you can think of around the pregnancy, fertility, and the childbirth journey, my work is to support you in releasing the painful, difficult emotions around that. Okay, so if something that I shared with you today really resonates with you, then you can always just book a consultation call. The consultation calls are free, and we can explore ways that I can support you. So, just if you have questions and if you're curious, right, we can explore that. And also, if you're like, yeah, I definitely need support, then we'll explore what the best form of support is for you. Okay, so that is my invitation to you, and explore the other. I feel like I didn't say something that I should have said. Yeah, so how I work, it isn't re-traumatizing, firstly. I think a lot of people avoid doing their healing because of the fear that something is going to be re-traumatizing. And this is, I started at the top of this episode saying that another idea has been germinating within me, and that's been the fact that we delay our healing because we think that in the process of healing we're going to revisit the pain, and that isn't necessarily the case. And depending on the modality that you're using for your healing, that isn't the case, right? You're going to touch on the emotions that are there. Yeah, you're healing the emotions, but you're not re-traumatizing yourself. And there was some like psychological I was about to call it something else. There's some psychological practice that was started a few years ago with army vets, where they were asked to retell, recount the experiences that they went through. And that shit re-traumatized people. Of course, if you're having them go back to the thing that has made them feel traumatized in the first place. And so I never ask people about, what happened on that day. Like, tell me that difficult, terrible story of what happened on that day. Like, no, I create space for whatever is coming up. And it might be work, it might be your partner, it might be your mother saying something insensitive, right? It might be memories of the baby. It might be how you perceive your body. It might be all sorts of things. And we work with what's present because it means that that's what's there. That's the thing on the surface that you are wanting to heal, that you're wanting to give space to. So that's what we work with, right? And you're gently guided to the next step and the next and the next, so that you are building your resilience week after week. Because when you work with the thing that feels most accessible to the body, and when you resolve that, you've developed more courage, right? You've developed the tools to go to the next step. So I'm thinking of this in terms of like the contractions or the waves. I don't drop you at the top of the hill and say, all right, let's tough this one out. Let's work through this one. We start gentle. We start wherever it is. And we might continue through it and it's still gentle, right? But what I'm saying is it's responding to where you are, which means that it isn't going to be traumatic. I think what creates trauma is when we are forced into situations that are too much too soon, right? We're forced into situations that we don't feel prepared for and we don't feel supported in. Okay, so I wanted to make that point because I do sense that people delay their healing because of the fear that it's going to hurt all over again. And I want you to understand that, like, if you're working with someone right now and that's what's happening, then that's not the right form of support for you, right? It isn't re traumatizing you. And if you're holding back, your ability to get support because of the fear that it's going to be difficult or it's going to be painful, then it just means that you need to explore a modality that doesn't put you in that pain, right? That is able to heal you by gently moving with the pace of your body. Okay. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to share today. This very, very big topic of trauma, but within this segment of sexual trauma and how it shows up in pregnancy and childbirth, right? It's similar organs, it's the same reproductive system that is being activated. And when your body feels as though it isn't safe, when you don't feel at home in your body, then being pregnant, right, and having changes happen in your body or going through childbirth might feel really difficult, really outside of your control, really as though you've lost your agency and unsafe and traumatic all over again, right? And let me also say that people have gone through trauma. In fact, most women have gone through trauma, right? Most women and birthing people have gone through trauma. And it doesn't mean that the fact that you've gone through trauma, that you aren't able to have a beautiful birthing experience, right? Because I have seen people who've gone through different forms of trauma have a beautiful birthing experience because of the support and the team that they created around them. Okay? Because they felt safe in the sacred environment that they created for themselves. And they didn't wake up one day and decide, oh, let me get this and do this and get this person. It's because they were supported, and it's because they either were empowered or along the way they developed the sense of empowerment in order to do that. Okay, so I don't want you to walk away from this thinking, oh, I've had sexual trauma, I'm doomed to go through a really difficult experience. What makes the difference is the team and the support that you create around you. Okay, so if you might already have ideas, so you hopefully now you have a better sense of what a doula does. Highly recommend that you get one. I work as a virtual doula in the sense that I'm not physically in hospitals or birthing room, but I am on the phone, on a video call, and guiding you and guiding your partner. And what I usually do is a whole lot more work with the partner so that the partner is able to do anything physical that I would have done in the room. Okay, so that's an option. Another option is getting a in-person doula. So hopefully now you understand the role of the doula, the benefit of getting a doula. You can pay for a doula by adding a doula on your registry, which, birthing people have done that. It's been a good option. So just know that by having the right team around you, it makes a difference in what happens in your birthing experience. And the reason why this is such an important topic is that it's a way of preventing greater harm and preventing more trauma, right? Because the fact that you went through trauma before, that wasn't your fault, right? You didn't choose to have an experience that would leave you feeling broken or leave you feeling as though, you can't fully be present in your body. You didn't choose that, right? And so what you now have the ability to do is to create the accommodations for yourself and to create the support for yourself so that the next time you are in a position that, there could be loss of control in your body, right? The next time you're in that position, you have the support around you so that you can rest and fully surrender and move with the process, move with the waves. Okay. So I am really going to end this one for now. Thank you so much for staying until the end. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Feel free to reach me. I am at hello@nataliefacey.com. and that is in the show notes. My name is Natalee, F as in face, and then a Y at the end, nataliefacey.com. My website is nataliefacey.com, and my Instagram is at the Birth Warriors. And like I mentioned earlier, I am launching a group program called Rebirth, and I'm so freaking excited about it. I won't spoil the surprise yet, but definitely look out for more information on that in the coming episodes and on social media. That launches in very early November, likely very early November. There are only 8 slots. That's it, because it's really important that the group is intimate. It's really important that everyone has space to process and go through their own cycle of rebirth after going through something difficult, after going through something traumatic. Being able to experience the phoenix rising, being able to experience who their life is now calling them to be, and the version of them that can be birthed after going through something really difficult, right? So I won't give away much more, but know that I'm so excited about it, and just continue to look out for info on that one, okay? Sending you so much love. Please share this episode with someone who you know will benefit from it, okay? That's how we build each other. That's how we lift each other, by thinking of each other and sharing the support and the resources that we know will be helpful. All right, sending lots of love, and I'll see you in the next episode.